When I handed my parents the keys to their new house, my mom just stared at them in her palm, like she was holding something impossible. My dad kept asking if this was real, if the house was actually theirs. 5 years earlier, when I told them I was going to build something meaningful with my life, they'd laughed. Not mean laughter, but the tired kind that comes from watching your kid fail too many times. They'd seen me drop out of college, lose jobs, make promises I couldn't keep. Standing in the driveway of a 3-bedroom house they now owned outright, with the mortgage paid in full, I finally understood what it felt like to prove them wrong. In the best possible way. Before everything collapsed, my life was perfectly average. I worked as a junior accountant at a small firm. Nothing exciting, but steady enough to cover my $900 rent and car payment, with a little left over for weekend plans. I lived in a decent apartment, had friends I genuinely enjoyed, and spent Sunday dinners at my parents' house eating my mom's lasagna and listening to my dad complain about his back pain from 30 years of construction work. My dreams weren't massive. Maybe get promoted to senior accountant, save enough for a house down payment, take my parents on the vacation they'd been talking about since I was 12 but never could afford. My mom had worked double shifts as a hospital aide for decades, and my dad had built half the houses in our county, coming home every night with aching joints and calloused hands. They'd sacrificed everything for me, which meant they'd kept nothing for themselves. I used to fall asleep thinking about how I'd take care of them someday, how I'd be the one giving back for a change. The termination letter arrived on a Wednesday morning while I was reviewing client files and drinking gas station coffee. Due to downsizing, your position has been eliminated effective Friday. 15 words that erased 2 years of my life. I read it 3 times before it registered, then walked to my supervisor's office to make sure it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't. They explained my final paycheck would include 1 week of severance and health insurance through the end of the month. I had $200 in checking, $340 in savings, and exactly 28 days to figure out survival. My rent was $900, car payment was $280, and student loan minimum was $175. I sat in my car after cleaning out my desk, doing math on a napkin, and realized I had maybe 5 weeks before complete financial collapse. The shame was worse than the fear. I'd have to tell my parents their 28-year-old son was moving back to his childhood bedroom, becoming another burden they couldn't afford. I attacked job hunting like my life depended on it, because it did. I created accounts on every employment website, customized cover letters until my eyes burned, and applied to everything from accounting positions to retail management to data entry clerk roles. I lowered my salary expectations weekly. I expanded my search radius to cities 2 hours away, thinking distance might equal opportunity. After 6 weeks, I'd submitted over 400 applications and received maybe 30 callbacks, most leading to phone interviews that ended with, "We'll keep your resume on file." My savings vanished. I fell 2 months behind on rent. My car got repossessed on a Thursday while I was inside a coffee shop preparing for another interview that would lead nowhere. I watched through the window as they hooked up my Honda Civic, and all I could think was how I'd tell my parents I needed to move home again. When I finally made that call, my mom just said, "Your room's still here, honey." But I heard the disappointment underneath, the same tone she'd used when I dropped out of college or got fired from the grocery store in high school. Living in my childhood bedroom at 28 felt like admitting complete defeat, but it also gave me something I hadn't had in months: time to think clearly instead of panic. I spent the first 2 weeks feeling sorry for myself, sleeping until noon and binge-watching Netflix until my brain felt numb. But on day 15, something shifted. Maybe it was overhearing my parents discuss whether they could afford to keep helping me, or watching my dad leave for work every morning at 62 while I lay in bed making excuses. I found an old composition notebook and started tracking every dollar I'd wasted over the years. Coffee shop visits, subscription services, impulse purchases that had seemed small but totaled thousands annually. Then I started reading about money management, not get-rich-quick schemes but actual financial education, how compound interest works, Why most people stay broke. How discipline beats talent every single time. I spent hours on forums reading stories from people who'd climbed out of debt, built businesses from nothing, transformed their lives through strategy rather than luck. The turning point came slowly, like building muscle memory. I took a part-time job at a local tax preparation office during filing season, not because it paid well, but because it got me out of the house and gave me something more to build on. While I was there, I noticed how many small business owners struggled with basic bookkeeping and financial organization. I offered to help a few clients organize their records for free, just to build experience and references. Word spread to other small businesses, and within 3 months I had 6 clients paying me $200 monthly each to handle their bookkeeping and quarterly taxes. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was mine, earned through skills I was developing rather than hours I was trading. I reinvested every dollar into learning, online courses in QuickBooks, tax preparation certification, business finance fundamentals. Instead of going out weekends, I stayed home building spreadsheets and financial systems. Instead of buying lunch, I packed sandwiches and used the savings to pay for software and continuing education. My parents watched this transformation with cautious hope, occasionally asking how things were going, but mostly just letting me work. By month 20 of living at home, I was earning more from freelance bookkeeping than I'd made at my corporate job. I had 15 regular clients, a waiting list of prospects and systems that practically ran themselves. The breakthrough came when a restaurant owner asked if I could help him analyze whether opening a second location made financial sense. I built comprehensive financial models, cash flow projections, and break-even analyses, work that would have cost him $5,000 from a consulting firm. I charged him $20,500 and delivered better results than he'd expected. That project gave me confidence to raise my rates across the board and start targeting larger clients. I wasn't just doing data entry anymore. I was solving real business problems and getting paid accordingly. I began saving aggressively, banking 70% of everything I earned. My parents thought I was being extreme, but I'd learned that financial security isn't about income. It's about the gap between what you earn and what you spend. 2.5 years after moving home, I had enough saved for a down payment on a small duplex in a decent neighborhood. The strategy was simple. Live in one unit, rent out the other, use rental income to cover most of the mortgage while building equity. It wasn't glamorous, but it was smart. The duplex needed work, new appliances, fresh paint, updated flooring, but I had cash flow to handle renovations and time to manage contractors. Within 4 months, I had a reliable tenant paying $1,050 monthly, which covered $850 of my $1,200 mortgage payment. I was essentially living for $350 monthly while building equity and appreciating property. My bookkeeping business continued growing, and I started investing surplus income in index funds and retirement accounts. Nothing fancy, just consistent contributions to low-cost investments that would compound over decades. By year 4, I owned 2 rental properties and had expanded my accounting practice to include 3 part-time employees. My parents still didn't fully understand what I did for work. They just knew I worked from home and seemed to be doing well. But they started mentioning more frequently how tired they were getting, how retirement seemed impossible on their savings. They'd worked their entire lives and had maybe $100,000 saved between them. Social Security would help, but not enough. They needed about $3,500 monthly to live comfortably in retirement, and the math simply didn't work. That's when I started looking at houses in the neighborhood where they'd always dreamed of living, tree-lined, streets with well-maintained homes and front porches perfect for morning coffee. I found a beautiful 3-bedroom ranch with a 2-car garage and backyard big enough for the garden my mom had always wanted. Asking price was $285,000. I ran the numbers. With my rental income and business profits, I could afford the monthly payments if I put down $80,000. It would mean selling 1 rental property and tightening my budget temporarily, but I'd been living below my means so long that it felt manageable. The closing took 5 weeks. On the day I planned to surprise them, I asked them to meet me for lunch near their new neighborhood. After we ate, I suggested we drive around and look at houses, just for fun. When we pulled into the driveway of 847 Pine Street, I said I wanted to show them something interesting about the architecture. I walked them to the front door, pulled out keys, and said, "What do you think of your new house?" The silence lasted forever. My mom looked at the keys, then at me, then back at the keys. My dad kept asking if this was some kind of joke. When finally registered that the house was theirs, mortgage-free, my mom cried the kind of tears that come when impossible things become real. Now, 18 months later, my parents are happily retired in their dream home. My mom has a garden that produces more vegetables than they can eat, and my dad spends mornings reading the newspaper in a sunroom he never thought he'd have. When people ask how I went from unemployed and living with my parents to financially independent in 5 years, I don't talk about the long hours or sacrifices. I tell them about the notebook where I first tracked my expenses, about the moment I decided to stop making excuses and start building solutions, because the money was never really the point. The point was becoming someone my parents could be proud of, someone capable of taking care of the people who had taken care of me. Success isn't just what you accumulate, it's what you can do for others when it matters most.